Exactly right. Thank God there's only 3 places to go for lunch.
Yes, anybody have? Yeah, but can you just send me?
Yeah, I just wanna make sure.
Yeah, I wish I.
I had to turn mine off
Okay.
because
Well, we do.
That I do not have.
Very prepared today. Can we do it downtown?
We could.
That would be easier for me.
Town. See? This is, I mean, for March.
I mean, if you can't, I can come.
Oh, workshops, is it? Nope, that was.
Okay.
Charging electricity.
See?
I will
don't have
try
it.
to, I'm gonna try to get it to conference downtown.
You're right, I think there was,
Nowhere.
But
I mean, come on, that's March 25th.
yeah, no, and there's no,
so I'll try to get it to, just
Nope.
But if, yeah,
No
if
yeah,
you
but
can
if
come.
not, I can.
I know. When's it due by?
Frangie, I was gonna
I
be
didn't
here
read
too
that yet.
first, I think.
All right, I can get it done today.
so they did.
I always panic when I take those photos.
He's gonna be in charge now.
We used to have to do it for Siemens all the time, and they weren't
On the
easy, actually.
22nd,
You
they're going
could
to the
easily,
select board too to
Like A, B, C, A and B, B and C,
What time?
A, B, C,
and they would
but
just,
not D.
they would really tweak the wording, and it was, you could fail, it was possible. How did you fail?
I think I just.
I was joking with them, 'cause they were very. They said, no, they're very subdued. Oh, that goes in there.
I was astounded to see 162,000 people work at Logan. I realized a lot of part-time people, lots and lots and lots.
You know, I skimmed through. So obviously
No, that
I'm not reading
Boston,
it carefully.
no,
No,
Logan.
I know, but I'm careful.
Yeah.
I obviously wasn't reading it carefully enough.
No, Logan was 162,000 people.
I didn't bring
And
it.
it's plausible because you get a lot of part-time people. I worked years ago for Pizza Hut and it was 80,000 people
Yay.
worked for Pizza Hut, of which the
Hey,
majority.
can you go, you could also, can you go to Maria
How are you?
and see if we can have her print off the warrant with the
Yes.
common
SMSA
recommendations?
around the, you know, the zone around the airport, I assume.
And make like
Can't be
5
just
copies,
on the
Okay.
that
airport.
would be good.
I don't know.
Police
60,000.
station, right, yeah, right
It's a
there.
lot, but if you figure maybe somebody.
She should be
will
able to go
hours a week.
online and make like, even if.
Right, and it's a 24-hour
What if we just do
facility.
the
and-
table of
Yeah.
contents?
I was like, what all? Yeah, or the table of
Just the table of contents.
Yeah,
they were both good.
I got here and this is at 1%, and I was like, oh, I don't have a charger. Let me give me a charger. You help me.
Is that working? Well,
Good, Rita, how are you?
I told Rebecca that she could have because of her crush on
We need a few wayward members. I can't figure out.
This is when we're being recorded. I noticed that they start recording things.
I never
Your
go
lip
back and
zipped.
look.
We were
I never go
talking
back
about
and look.
getting organized last week, but we're all being recorded. And I noticed they were doing the same thing.
Oh, hi, Greg.
The recording starts before the meeting starts. I don't see one of these orange things.
So it's on tap for tomorrow.
Does anybody have a weather plan?
Yes,
Sunny, good. Brian and I fly off island in 55.
it's gonna be windy, but you can fly off, it won't be raining.
What about coming back?
Never, you won't be back for 3 days, no, I'm just kidding.
You said that very convincingly,
And
too.
Libby sounded too excited.
Here we go.
Okay, 20 in the morning,
Hourly.
20 to 30 with gusts over 40.
They'll fly.
There's the morning. Rain, okay, morning is rain and 25, 28, 27, 26, that's flyable. That's Monday, sorry.
For who?
Well, not me, I'm not going. It's Tuesday morning.
Are you taking Rectrix or Cape Air?
Retrix, but
To where? To Hyannis?
Thank you.
yeah,
In the
they
20s
might fly
all day.
to over 35, but it's a question of whether I will.
But again, you can always have, they've said the last 2 days are gonna be gusty, today and tomorrow. So 20 to 30, gusts could occasionally be over 40 miles an hour.
I flew that once and I hit my head on the ceiling.
Yeah, see.
Me
All
too.
everyone in the flight.
I one of those flights all the way to Boston one time, and I thought, oh my gosh, please.
Fix
12 minutes is all I would be able to handle,
Yeah.
if that in those.
I was not a happy bunny. Yeah, but it doesn't feel quick when you're
Yeah.
bouncing.
Well, actually, but the red tricks plane is very,
Oh, it
I
is?
mean, it literally, they're like
Seems
planning,
scary.
It
they're
doesn't
preparing
feel
for
quick,
landing
though, when
and
you're
on
watching the
takeoff.
landing,
Doesn't seem
they're
scary
coming
here.
in sideways.
I haven't-
It is dirty.
I
It's a
haven't-
much bigger.
I
more-
haven't. It's
I
not,
wouldn't-
what kind of plane is it?
Oh, it's a Beach King Air
Oh,
turboprop. It's a big air. It's way different. It's a different level of. I would go, yeah, I would go either way. I actually, I want Cape Air. I feel like I fly it so much. What the hell? The pilot wants to fly, why worry, you know?
Why worry?
Why
You
worry?
know how they fly?
What
They're
do you-
paid on the basis of a completed trip.
Yeah. So they don't get paid if they kill me. I don't get paid.
Well, you know.
That's not reassuring at all.
That's not,
I think
that's
it's
very
a little
not
bouncy, but-
reassuring.
Particularly if the rent's due, it's the end of the month and.
Actually, the thing about Cape Air that is, I've been flying those same airplanes for 35
They're
years.
getting new ones.
Yeah, they are getting new ones.
Another
Those,
one.
those Cessna 402s are ancient.
I always feel compelled to watch everything the pilot does.
Every time I get on the plane, I keep thinking about the trip Greg and I were on.
Rita should go on your plane.
I think Libby would be a natural at that one.
Bring a can of ginger ale, but don't open it when you first get off the plane.
Does it work on this, cause I use the C-bands on the boat, the wristbands, the
I've
pressure,
never tried that.
those have helped. I don't know
Have
if
they?
it's psychosomatic, but they have helped. But I don't know if it's the same for things, it's such a different.
Huh?
I don't know.
It's like for me,
I
it's
get
not
really
about 8
something.
seconds that it's scary.
Oh, you're not a big flyer?
Oh,
Really not?
not on those.
So
planes.
hi, welcome
Yeah,
back.
I cannot
Thank
go
you.
those planes.
I-
I do it, but I can't. It's
Friday.
hard.
Oh, Brian, if you want to to recover.
Could I go to that? I could take the 6:30 car boat to make sure I got flight.
Each one is a longer trip with a greater chance of being green by the time you get to the other side.
So, I saw today that Doris Day died.
I'll,
I didn't
I'll
know
be
she
at
was
the
still-
airport.
Yeah, I'll have the same reaction.
I only knew that she was alive because of answering trivia at the culinary center back in January.
Ah,
And I got it wrong because I thought she was dead.
well,
It's at the airport.
she is now.
She is
Now you would've gotten it
I would have
right.
been right.
My concern.
I
is
know,
if
that's
I decide to
cool.
take a
She had a
740
good run.
Well, if I decide to take a 740, it gets canceled.
Where does she
I'll
live, in
just go to the airport
California?
and suck it up.
I didn't click on it.
Franklin Bartlett.
Oh, no, I just saw
So I
him,
can do.
like
we
2 days
can do
ago,
the first one.
getting it, or 3 days ago, getting, or 4, maybe a week ago,
Yeah, I think
getting out of a van into
Cheryl
his,
sent me an email Friday.
cause it was last week, cause he was getting out of a van going into the house. Oh, that's sad. It was so sad. Mm-hmm. Oh dear, I didn't know that, thanks for telling me. Yeah, I live right behind him. Oh, that's sad. Where were you?
Florida, Washington. Florida was fun.
What's that near? Thank you.
That side, I was gonna say that
I mean, I don't know if that's public. She seems to be there. Okay, right? Yeah, it's fine. You were here, but I'm used to a week. So they had a family thing at some time. But no, I think they're, I think they're still judged. Literally, got up to dinner, peeled up. She was trying to come back to
Jason?
Good, wait, thank you.
One more thing?
There's none. Bye-bye.
Maybe one for 5.
Right, we're just talking.
Hey, Matt.
Okay. If the select board does. Okay.
Just guessed. That's good. Special. Very special. It's really ridiculously cold out.
I have a winter coat on today. Yeesh. It's cold.
I cleaned mine, I am not gonna wear it and get it dirty. No. That's what I was doing all weekend. Couldn't wear all the too soon. All the boys' coats, all their winter stuff, putting it all away. Getting rid of everything. You know the drill. I'm not great, but then every once in a while, I just go and do it all.
Oh, well, she will.
That's what I do. At least the outcomes are so much faster than kids. Not the way it's done.
When does school end here?
No studies.
No snow.
There's no snow.
To account for.
That's true.
Wow.
That's good.
There is snow in Austin.
It-
Like it might
It
snow.
snowed in Western Mass, so let's be careful.
Yeah, my
No, I saw
parents,
that in the report.
my parents are in upstate New York and they seem just not the families getting snow.
My parents are professional.
No, it's awful. Yeah, but just think about it. If we get it in May, it'll go away quick, right?
It won't be a snow day. I think that's.
Never know.
I have a picture from when I was a little girl, me and all my sisters, and we got a foot of snow in the Berkshires. And it was May 9th, and my mom made us get dressed in our snowsuits.
No, they
and
don't
hold up a
have
little
anything
sign that
like
says
that.
today is May 9th.
At least you like to put your snowsuit on versus your bathing suits. Go out there in your shorts and take the same picture.
So I'm concerned we're not gonna have a quorum for the finance committee, so we're gonna be here as guests for the board of selectmen. Participate as guests in the discussion, it's their select board friends. I'm sorry, we're down a person, and somebody said they couldn't come today, and I can't find the other wayward souls.
Well, I can call the select board meeting to order at 4:12. Now what? I don't have the list.
I don't know quite how you want to do this, but there had been discussions, I think, by Select Board and FinCom shortly after a town meeting that it might be a good idea to have a little get-together to discuss what went well, what could be improved upon, what articles do we want to maybe think about possibly modifying. For example, the $6.2 million Surfside Area Roads article passed at town meeting, did not pass at the ballot. And some of the feedback I have gotten is that that was just too much bundled into one article. So Rob and I have talked a little bit about separating that out and maybe phasing it. And if we have a special, we might potentially consider putting it on if we're having a special for something else. If not, then it's going to go on, you know, the next round, go through Capcom again, and they can also weigh in on the splitting up. I don't. So I don't know if you guys want to go through the warrant and or the ballot results and talk about any of that. I wanted to just mention one thing that I'm going to be working on as a result, and that has to do with citizen petitions and some of the public outreach. So we did more public outreach this year, I would say, than we ever have done for a town meeting. And one of the public outreach sessions that we had was in this room at 4 o'clock, maybe 2 weeks before town meeting. It was just a public informational session, and you could come and ask anything you wanted about the one. I think Mary might have been there. I forget. Okay. You might have been at some other thing, but 2 people were there. And however, we actually had a very good discussion about citizen warrant articles, and some of the items that came out of that had to do with a better guide to citizens and more effort maybe on the part of town admin to meet with the citizen petitioners and try to get out of them what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And whether or not the town agrees with it or not, we could certainly point out, you know, if it's flawed or if it's operationally not doable, or we have concerns about how much it might cost. We could certainly tell them we're not going to recommend your idea because of XYZ, or great idea, we are going to recommend it because of XYZ, but just a bit more so that we can then report out to the FinCom. There was one article in particular that came up for discussion during town meeting that, I don't know about other people, but there was a key component of it that I did not realize, and I don't remember it ever coming up during any of the hearings or discussions about it. And so things like that should be a little bit more known beforehand. It was the bike article, and just as a little bit of example, I did meet with Ian Golding a couple of times, and the thing that I didn't realize was he actually proposed to town meeting that the stop signs on the bike paths would be removed under his plan, but I don't remember that being talked about at any of the hearings. I remember the discussion about installing stop signs for the vehicles, but not the removal for the bikes, so they would just, you know, go through. Anyway, also there might be, in working with 1 or 2 of you, maybe we'd come up with some sort of criteria for how the FinCom maybe better reviews citizens articles. What is the estimated cost? Who's the, what department is it going to impact? Is there going to be operational impacts? Is there a history with this particular proposal? Just that kind of thing. Anyway, I looked up some other citizen article guides from other towns, and ours is actually not bad. It has more in it than some other towns, but I found some that are even more comprehensive, so I thought I would just add on ours, run it by you all, and see what you, maybe you'll have some thoughts, and then just post it online and point people to it.
So we've done a what went right, what went wrong in the past few years. In addition to the things that we spoke about, I think a discussion about whether we like the process and the timing. My thought this year was that we got, for a variety of reasons, got screwed up on the timing. That ranged from fairly seemingly arduous process with marijuana, trying to get that figured out. We dramatically missed on capital committee. We had asked them to be done by the middle of December. We were scheduled to have a joint meeting in the middle of December, and I think the select board got their stuff on the 19th or the 20th, and we approved the warrant on the 21st normally, and we postponed that a week, as you know. And there was no discussion at the finance committee about any of the capital items, which was a departure from prior years. Now the process has gotten think the vetting process is a little bit stronger, but at the same time, there's something, we've got to figure that out. We were a little, I think for the reasons, just people, some staff changeover as well as marijuana, I think they were pretty late getting stuff out. So that the question becomes, do we, from my perspective, is that schedule still a good schedule, or do we need to push some of these things a little bit further into the year? So we do our review of all the general fund budgets at the beginning. Hey! We do have a quorum.
Yay.
Thank you, Stephen. So do we push the, do we push that process, which we run generally the last weekend of January, back in February? In addition to all the things that are going on, that we just run up against an increasingly complicated budgeting process. So those are a couple. So I personally think that making sure that we get the capital process back on track. A couple of years now, Jason's on the capital. I think that process is much better, and I would think that we would have enough knowledge about what's coming, that process ought to go faster rather than slower. So, anyway.
I think we had some slowdowns this year because of unrelated things to town meeting. So Surfside Crossing took a lot of staff time. The marijuana RFQ took a lot of staff time, and all that stuff was happening concurrently. And so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So do you think that's a one-off situation, or?
Well,
no,
yes. What's our
Yes.
marijuana this year?
Will always be something. That's life.
Nantucket Inn was another one.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I think we're gonna
Thank
get
you, Matt.
more, I think we're getting more of that stuff. I think it's more confusing, and I think we need to push it the other way. I think it should be early. The capital should be in November, December, November instead of December. I mean, I think we need to push everything.
Will be our holiday days. I was looking at the calendar.
And that's really early, and it's really hard to get at final numbers and things by things. There's things we just don't know yet.
Is there anything sacrosanct about late March?
It just runs into Easter, school vacation, and well, that's generally what we try to be ahead of. And sometimes Easter falls in March, and it's totally separated from that.
I know there was some discussion last year before as well, trying to have it before elections, so in case there's a select board member that is advocating for the particular area at that point. I'm running again, still really elected, but I don't know if that's. Is there at this point a special town meeting in the fall? This year?
No.
I hope not.
I mean,
I think no, everybody hopes not.
if the right thing possibly happens, it could be. Anyway.
Oh, I didn't realize that was even a possibility.
Well, certainly on the capital program committee stuff, there's really no reason that even if they can't complete all of their analysis, the FinCom should be able to review, I don't know, the preliminary set of projects and spending. I don't, at least from my perspective, I don't think it all has to be absolutely nailed down. If you have sort of a review session with 90% of what they think they're going to be proposing, and then at least then if you have to go back and look at it again in March or something, you've already done a big chunk of the work.
Have you guys thought about setting up a capital number? The target this year is X amount.
I'll speak for, I haven't thought of it.
Yeah, definitely hasn't come up to me, like, we haven't really discussed
Well, maybe even including overruns. This year we're gonna spend $50 million all in. We'd like to, for 25. I mean, it seems like part of this is the waves wash in, and then that would be a big wave, but a big number of this. And I, again, not hearing from the capital committee, I'm not sure how all those things came through. It seemed like many of them made it to
There were also a lot that did not. They have a pretty rigorous ranking process. Yep. Some of the Capcom's numbers are, of course, based on what free cash looks like, what potential free ups there might be in capital projects that are either completed and didn't use the entire appropriation or we're not going forward with it. There's not a lot of that. And what is very urgent. So sewers, I think, were considered among the higher priority items, but that's mostly on sewer rates, not so much tax rate. And the capital projects were really just ranked in accordance with a whole series of criteria.
But gross dollars was not one of those criteria.
But, you know, but it should be. I mean, when I first got involved, which was 5.5, 6 years ago, I was on the capital program committee. And one of the things we did that year is we had a 10-year budget that was kind of a, you know, long-term capital plan, how much cash the town was going to expend each year on various, you know, it obviously moves around, moves in and out. But at least you have that, and you can relate it to, you know, where the town is in terms of its borrowing capacity or free cash. You know, you certainly have a range each year or something, as opposed to simply, as you say, that it was a big number this year and not such a big number the next year.
Is that something that we would be able to sort of plot out on the graph to understand the last 10 years to see what the trend is?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the things that, I know that you and I have talked about it a little bit, David, is that we're realistically and literally playing catch up with a lot of this prior, so we've talked about it in the sense that I've always looked at it as that from a couple years ago, even into next year, the year after, it may be a little bit larger than we've expected because of the fact that we do have to catch up with the infrastructure, and there's a lot. I mean, there's over $500 million on that sheet, which is a lot.
That in and of itself is an explanation coming from the policy setting of the select board is a useful message. It's not just spending willy-nilly, there is a fact that we need to catch up on a bunch of the infrastructure.
And I think it was last year, maybe you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was last year where the select board made it a recommendation or adopted a vote that they wanted us to focus on infrastructure and getting the capital projects done so that we were fixing and updating the infrastructure. So we certainly have tried to the extent possible. I mean, granted, I know that there was an awful lot this year, you know, $14 million of it was at the landfill. So there certainly was a lot, and sewer has a lot. And again, there's going to be a fairly substantial number probably next year on there for the sewer enforcement. So, which, you know, that probably takes $22 or $23 million if we didn't have that off the table and pushed out a few more years. So, fortunately, that will more than likely, the construction piece will qualify for SRF funding, so it'll be a little bit more palatable. But we certainly can go back and look at the average of what we had put towards free cash. I mean, last year, you know, we had, I think, the highest free cash that the town has had in, at least since I've been here, at almost $10 million. So there was certainly a concerted effort to not spend every dollar of it, but to attempt to fit as many capital projects within that to try to chip away and try to be as efficient as possible with those dollars.
We'll probably see a big amount of increase in free cash this year because we couldn't budget for the marijuana tax or the short-term rental tax.
We would probably see that in fiscal, well, the short-term rental goes in starting on July first, so we'd see that, which would be available in fiscal '21, and the same with the marijuana tax. Would be fiscal '21 that we would see it, we wouldn't see it for fiscal '20.
And how much is that going to be? It's not going to be millions.
Well, because the state will has a policy when new revenue comes out of not letting you plan for it.
Right.
Anything above what our budget is, use local the room occupancy tax. We budget about 3.2 million, and we've historically collected somewhere above that.
Okay.
Last year we collected 3.6.
Okay.
But every dollar above what we've historically collected would automatically flow into free cash. So
Okay.
it could be whatever, I don't know what exactly it'll be, and I wouldn't want to venture a guess, but it will be a lot of money that would flow in the first year.
Are we restricted on what we do with free cash?
We can spend it for any, town meeting can appropriate it for any lawful purpose.
But we have a policy that says
Right.
do not spend it on recurring items.
Right, so we've limited it to capital and one-time items or into reserves, stabilization or capital stabilization or something
So,
like that.
so does it,
Or leave it
probably gonna
unappropriated.
go into controversial territory here, so I'm gonna apologize. But the landfill takes up a lot of our operating money. Is it time to think about supplementing revenue there, some sort of tipping fee, so that we can boost our free cash, so that we can go to particular projects that may not pass at the ballot, that you can get into budget as a free cash?
Well, the way we would do that is if there was a tipping fee, it would be part of the enterprise fund itself. So what it would do is it ultimately would reduce the amount that we transfer. So instead of there's a 1% obligation and requirement for capital funding in the operating budget on an annual basis. If we freed up additional levy capacity, we could make the decision to use that to fund above the 1% if that was something everybody was in favor of. But any tipping fee or enterprise fund revenue would go there, and it would just simply reduce the amount we would potentially transfer.
Right, but it frees up.
It would free up. It would
revenue.
free up. Yes, it would.
Which,
Yeah.
You know, an observation is that there are some projects that are really hard to get through town meeting and ballot. In many ways, they're not all that large dollar items.
Sure.
You know, is that a strategy so that, you know, you can pay for them out of free cash?
It's really hard to see things pass quite well at town meeting after discussion, fail at the ballot.
Our packet from last Wednesday had a great breakdown from Rob of where money is going in and out of the dump and what different aspects that we're charging for, where some of the losses are. And we haven't spoken about it specifically, but my feeling is that in this conversation around what's going on with haulers and changing the system and then the contracts that are coming up, is that discussions around how we charge for waste may include some sort of change in tipping fees, or they've been talking about a pay as you throw, different fees for haulers, not many specifics yet, but I do think when you look at the numbers, you can see there's sort of glaring areas where I think some of that could change, but I think it'll be a little bit of time.
You may get charged if you don't recycle, you don't separate, you know, things like that.
Yeah, I think, and that's the conversation we're having, is finding that balance between incentivization charges and then penalties as well, and trying to make the switch to the new system where we can really clean up our composting. So I do think it will change, but I don't think we're going to do it exactly.
Another thing to look at that we talk about, but it's very unpopular, is the betterments. You know, every time we talk about Surfside in that area, I always say we should be bettering this. People are upset that we aren't doing it quick enough. Well, if we did a 50% betterment, we'd be doing twice as much right now, and they'd be happier. So, you know, like part of this is we for years placed the cost of development onto the taxpayers. So the taxpayers pay for the development of this island, and now the bill is coming due. So if these things are under, it has
been a policy decision, not necessarily, it was partly a policy decision at the select board level, sort of 10 years ago, but it's been a policy decision in our planning department to do it that way. And I think that we have to sort of think, is that the right way to do it? Or should we be asking, you know, if we're gonna take over a road that's private, should it be up to code before we take it? You know, and so there's things like that that I think that, you know, we haven't really had the ability as a community to talk about. And that's a lot of money. And those things are really expensive.
The surf side, is it too late to talk about that?
No, I'm waiting for a, kind of a guidance bulletin from town council on how to assess betterments on public roads. So I'll get that to you. It won't be popular.
Well, it's just worth discussion.
It is what people think the money is free. They think the town has tons of money and the tax rate is low, so they can just let it rip. And you know, maybe that was true. We had a $20 million budget. It's not really true. It's $100 million, $120 million. So I just, you know, anyway.
I have a little bit.
Great.
So one of the things, there was a bunch of things I thought we should talk about. One of them is the recurring requests. So this was I think my 4th year on finance committee, and we've asked the water company every single year for a specific plan of what they're gonna do with their reserve fund. And they under budget and don't state the revenue they're gonna collect every single year. And David's asked them repeatedly to say either come up with a reason of how you're doing it this way or lower the tax rate. So we're gonna ask them for 5 years in a row this year for the same thing. Yeah, lower the water rate. So that doesn't make any sense to me, because we have, it's like the Groundhog Day meeting over and over and over again. And the same thing with the school committee. We said to them 4 years running, ask us for more money, right? We know you have these problems, right? They have problems in terms of how many kids are being served in the classroom versus speak English as a second language or have learning disabilities, and they should really have 2 teachers in each class, right? Or they should identify 2 classes out of each grade that get 2 teachers and figure out the distribution of their kids. Like, somebody needs to come up with a plan. I mean, if you have the finance committee of the town saying to the school committee, make us a proposal, it's okay to ask for more money, but try to solve some of these problems. I think that's something that's worth discussing. We've discussed at the finance committee the situation with the social services budget, and I think that there's probably a better way to do that. And we know that with the hospital this year, I think what it really uncovered was a disparity in how that service was being handled there and how it was being funded. And we just take a gigantic risk of not fully understanding who's served by that money and what would happen if it went away. Not that it should automatically become the town's problem, but there should be a context in which the conversation happens so we know the impact. Because if how much did they ask us for, Denise? Like
249,000.
And how much did we give them? Just under 100?
105,000.
Right. But sort of there was an implication that if we don't up the funding, that service might go away. And that would be really poor for the island of Nantucket. So I think if we don't look at these things before we go into the budget process, we don't really know where they're going to turn up or what impact they're going to have. And then, this is also not a popular topic, the stop sign situation. And this could be just me. Like, I don't understand how we can have, you know, governed by individual citizen on the floor, convince everybody else that we should have a stop sign somewhere. And then we have to pay for it. And we have qualified people managing these departments who have a complete opposite opinion. And then we do it, and it's going to be a problem, as we all know. So I don't know what the ways are to mitigate some of those situations. I just think it's worth saying. And then I don't know what the answer is, right? I mean, and then the last part is, I think that going into the budget situation, if we could, because this is something that maybe you do at the select board level and I don't know it, like take last year's warrant article and give an update on each thing, where it is, how much has been spent on this. Because when Rich Brannigan got up and talked about the money at the turf fields, not having the bathroom, whatever that whole thing was, I didn't know that, right? I don't know, did anybody? I mean, the selectmen might have known that.
That was not entirely accurate.
Yeah,
It
that's
was-
part of the problem.
Okay, but so how do we, like, so forget that example then. So like next
Well, no,
year,
that's
when
an
we look.
instructive
That's a
example.
perfect
Yes,
example.
it's a good
Or
example,
something
but
else.
look at all of the things that are in the warrant article from this past year. And almost like before we go into the budget thing, say, okay, this is what's happened on each thing, this is what cost was incurred, this is the status of this, so that whatever is coming forward, we know about. And I mean, for me, those things are, you know, I regretted the landfill vote. I felt like when we had that discussion on the town floor, I probably really didn't know enough about what the long-term impact of that could have been. And that was a really important vote, I think, in terms of capping off those cells and thinking about what's happening in the future. And the science of recycling is changing so quickly right now, and the decisions that people are making, we didn't necessarily take the long view. So I thought that, and I thought, you know, the short-term rental committee and what they're studying, and having to be another committee to do another thing, and having to support that, and trying to figure out, like, what's the policy? Like, what could we get from that? I mean, could we as a group have said, here's the financial impact of what revenue we can gather, right? What's the impact? So we have this committee. What is the work actually going to be? Is it going to identify a process? Is it going to identify revenue? Like, what's the cost to implementing all of that, right? Just that. And then I think that the other thing facing us going forward is our island home, which I'm really concerned about. And as we go into this next budget season, are there preemptive things that we should meet and discuss so that everybody's knowledge and education level is the same, right? We all know the same information. So there's my list.
We're assigning you pay for wage. That should pretty much take care of it.
Just to touch on one, you know, I think again, the Delta Bill conversation, it would be helpful at some point, you know, again, this is sort of future dashboards or, you know, in terms of transparency, when we have large warrant articles or even $700,000, whatever it is, that go towards something where the general public has an ability to see where we are with that. I did feel, you know, the same, but whether it was correct or incorrect, there's lots of articles that from the past that we have allocated money towards, and I don't know if they've been spent or not, and it would be very helpful. And I think, in a way, it also speaks to, I heard many people who voted for the stop sign simply because Kimball Sutton broke down every single thing that was going on. And they were impressed, and they feel that we don't do the same. Yeah.
Well, it didn't cost that.
It also doesn't really.
87 cents for the white paint.
Yeah. I mean, Stephen, I had some of my own questions. I mean, definitely thinking about, but I think that that's sort of missing the point is on the floor at town meeting. People respect when they feel that someone's put effort into the numbers. And I think the unfortunate part is that we don't necessarily get the same, we don't have the same potential. People think we're just asking for $30 million and we haven't really broken down our $14 million to the landfill, and the work isn't there. So if there's any way, to me, it's sort of marrying the two, at least showing, even retrospectively, if there's a way to show people, we secured $14 million 5 years ago, and this is where it went, and that's how it's. So even if it's not for the future, it's definitely, to me, the two come together and has to be perception and transparency about where the money's going.
A related point to what you just said, which I find interesting, was that one of the things that I found interesting at town meeting was we can ask for 20 million, we can up it to 20 million for affordable housing with no clue at all of how it's going to get done. So we don't know it's 87 cents for paint, and we'll vote for that. And yet we won't let the select board sign lease contracts for town beaches because we don't trust them to do that. So we let the town have $20 million with no process behind for affordable housing, and yet we're not going to let them sign leases in 20 minutes later. So I think, to your point, people probably do like the detail, but they forget it the next topic that comes up. So while it's an interesting point, there is a lot of disconnects at town meeting floor with the things that get discussed. And my one comment that I'd like to add to Joanna's list is, when we talked about the affordable housing, as you can see, I don't like spending money when we don't have a process, and I realize we haven't spent it yet. I understand that. However, that's the work that needs to go behind that is actually a full-time job for at least one person, if not two, to make that really work. And the second piece of that is, I would have liked, or I would have appreciated knowing when the select board was going to discuss that, Because to turn around and when we recommend 10 million with a sunset, and the select board stands up and bumps it up to 20 on town floor, after I think David had given an eloquent example of, I've got a great idea, give me $20 million and I'll work out the details later. I'm using the short form of what you said. And then it's like, okay, let's make it 20. What? He just said 10 was a risk. So I would like the select board and the finance committee, particularly on citizen warrants, to be hand in hand on the town floor. Because I think that was a disconnect for me, because we spent hours discussing it in FinCom, and there wasn't any select board members at our discussion. And I didn't know when select board was discussing, my fault, of course. So in the future, I'll find out when you guys are discussing citizens warrants that have a big number to them and want to be in the room to be able to object, to raise some of the things that I was thinking about in respect particularly to that article.
Is it appropriate for possible to have a joint meeting sometime during that cycle? Because I do think something like this is very beneficial, and even though I can go to your meetings and you can come to ours, to be able to bring up some of these conversations, why did you put it at 10?
Right.
What are your concerns? I think that would be helpful if it's possible.
Well, I think we certainly can do the joint meetings. One of the things that we try to do on those, particularly the citizens articles, is give the proponents a lot of time.
Yeah.
So, whereas you all have an agenda and a set amount of time, I think we gave between an hour and a half or 2 hours on that article alone, plus whatever time Stephen put in.
Well, yeah, I think they're charging, I think it was at least an hour, at least 3 meetings.
Yes, yes, I was gonna say it was longer than that
So,
too.
and I think speaking of the finance committee, we're more than happy to do that, because that's, we have a different
that's our job.
dynamic than you all operate in, so we can have those kinds of discussions. And while I think a joint meeting would be helpful, maybe the finance committee meetings are the right place, and that we think, that we make a considered decision, that we get more select board participation.
Or collaboration.
Well, and I think Denise raised a very good point. I don't think we should ever go into town meeting where we're not on the same page on a financial article.
But I disagree with it, because, we are an advisory committee to town meeting and to the select board. And the select board is the policy setting board. Then they decide that, our analysis doesn't take into account all the things that they have to be accountable for. You guys set your, the policy agenda, the goals, I think, the strategic goals, and that's a different thing. And they may just need a certain amount of money to accomplish a goal.
Fair enough. That, obviously the select board doesn't have to agree with what the FinCom suggests, but I do think there ought to be some point in the process where, whether it's the joint meeting or the chair, goes through and say, we agreed to this number, or we approved this article on this basis with this particular budget, just so you know what we were thinking, as opposed to, I would feel on Tuesday night, but literally saying, well, on town meeting floor, it does look a little weird to bump the number up that much.
Or even just, I think there's arguments saying, even if we disagree, at least knowing where everyone stands before we
Yeah.
go in.
Yeah, I don't think there's
Yeah.
a requirement we agree.
No,
Yeah.
but it would be
I
nice to, just,
Yeah, on that one, wasn't our comment in the warrant? So, but
It was right before it happened. There was
Yeah.
a week's lag time.
I mean, we knew it was coming, it just still, it just seemed to me, sitting in the audience in the front row now, heckling
You
David,
like- you
heckling
like-
We
David
were.
and Stephen,
Yes, we
making faces, but nobody can see us.
Back, the open face.
No, I like the front row. David eloquently goes through blah, 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 eloquent blah, blah, and then Jason stands up and goes, boom, 20. It's like, okay, so it just,
I think you guys are talking about the same thing, but I look at it differently. You said the comments that you got was that people liked or supported the stop sign measure because Campbell had the breakdown of costs. I saw it differently being in the room, that I thought it was when Tim Leffler's spoke. I thought he swung that way. And I think that, that's maybe the strongest message that I've learned over the years, is that style and the messenger matters as much as the message. And I think that as a town, we could do better, whether it's, you know, having somebody on staff whose job it is to craft the message for us. You know, I think that sometimes it's not about the numbers, sometimes it is. Sometimes it's about the messenger, sometimes it's not. But knowing how to get that message across for whatever issue that we're trying to explain to people in a very short window of time. You know, in the longest view, it's probably weeks long, that you have attention of the voters to get a message out. So how best to do that, and who's best to relay that message. And I think for a relatively small investment, you can make a big impact.
Sort of, I would agree, and I think, John, to what you were saying about something like our own home at some point, I think last time it suffered a little bit of discompacting. It wasn't, the message, or the messenger, whatever way it was presented, just wasn't necessarily compelling, but it's a skill set, isn't it?
You know, I don't know. And again, sometimes it's about, I think it's different based on the issue, but I think Michael Kozort and his team, it was a very large team with subsets of smaller teams who were out there doing a roadshow for a year and then sold us a $46 million pool in discussion. You know, that's a message. There's something to be learned.
It's a PR agency, right, who specializes.
Well,
You know,
I mean,
and it could
I
just
think
be
it's
that it's the kids. You know, it could be that it's the message, but maybe it's not. You know, maybe there's something to go back and look at and say, if you really want to get the word out about something, if we as a town, we as an entity really care about an issue, then, you know, this is the number of months it takes to get something done. And not to, you know, risk the burnout and frustration that we feel when you get the support of town meeting, even if it's narrow, and we lose the town.
Well,
Maybe it's not that we didn't do our homework, it's just that we didn't message it properly.
And there could be op-eds, right? I mean, that's how influence kind of works. It doesn't, I mean, it would be great to have it in the Inky, but it could also be in June Man or some other publication where people are thoughtfully writing some op-eds. But I wanted to say something about those recurring requests, because it occurs to me that those might not be your priorities, right? And if that's the case, then it would be great if you said, we don't care about the water rate, or that's not important to us. Focus on these other things, because otherwise it's just the wheel spinning.
I think I've solved the water issue.
Okay, wow, congratulations.
I've been working on it.
Done. David, that is done.
I can check that off the list.
Water rates are going down next month.
Well, I don't know about that.
I think the biggest, I don't think we need to hire a PR firm. I understand that we need to go out and do our homework, but I think some of it is based on the emotion and what the issue is. I don't know, so people feel very strongly. You know, the beach stuff, people feel very strongly about it, and they're gonna put up a fight no matter what you say. There's a group that's gonna put up a fight no matter what. I think what Denise said that made the most sense of all of it is trust. And I think part of what's happening is people don't, sort of on the stop sign issue, they don't trust that what is being proposed is going to be effective. They don't trust that the numbers behind it have been thought through. They don't trust that you can add 500 cars a year and, you know, and add a few roundabouts and everything's gonna be fine. And so I think that those things are more hinging on a lack of trust from the, you know, from the voters and the islanders. And I think a lot of the sort of like, you know, the whalers, a lot of the people who live here were sold for years that building is our, you know, is our industry, and if we keep expanding, we're all gonna do great. And now they're upset because they're like, wait a minute, we listened and you told us it was gonna be fine. You know, and they're mad, and there's a you know, there's a backlash going on. And I think what's happening, I think how I look at sort of the stop signs and the growth and a lot of that is that we have to recognize that we're an urban environment and not a suburban environment. You know, and I think roundabouts and through roads and stuff like that are not urban grid patterns. And it's gonna take a long time for people to realize how you have to do these things. It's gonna be hard for 5 or 10 years that people really embrace that we're more like Manhattan than Western Mass. We used to be Western Mass. You know, so.
I did hear some very positive feedback from some people after town meeting, that they, in terms of like their level of trust, that they were really pleased with how much our board got up and spoke this year. That they found that some years we don't say anything, we just kind of sit there staring at them. and that it was really a good message. We got up and spoke on quite a lot of issues, and I definitely got very positive feedback. And that the explanation helped people make their decisions. I do think that we have to combat in some way, and the other towns are doing this, the misinformation that flies around on social media. It's one thing for us to put out the correct information, the positive information, but there's also we might want to make an effort to actually dispel the incorrect directly.
And make sure, and just make sure that any information is out there. Last special town meeting, when we were discussing for the first time the Surfside Road corridor improvement, there was very little information available. I mean, even when it was before the finance committee, we didn't have the full set of maps. And we had a very dense consultant written report with numbers that I don't think anybody at this table could explain if they had to about the flow ratings and different shorthand ways of saying how much better the system was going to work than if we had just put together like a 15-second animation, or just gone to YouTube and shown me what a 15-second animation looks like of how flow is going to be improved. That's just, if we had taken a step back, if somebody had gone into the community and asked 100 random people, and said, do you have any idea what this is going to be about? And if 90 people said they have no idea what this is going to be, then you know it's going to be good. And sometimes I think we get too in the weeds, and we think because we speak amongst one another, we think that people know what we're talking about, and they don't. They have no idea. So I don't think we need a consultant, but somebody whose job, or a large part of what their job is to be in the community and hear and ask, do you know what we're discussing? Do you know what's going to be discussed?
Well, it's a lot of different staff people, but that's why we increased our public informational sessions, and we went to groups, and we tried to get out, but,
But to Dawn's point, there is a lot of misinformation on social media.
Yeah,
And
no,
some of-
you're preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
I know
But
that.
that's in life in general, not just Nantucket.
But it's a problem for us.
Originally bought all of Poets Corner lot to make it into a rotary, and then they later decided to cut off half of it and sell it to J.D. Bessie. J.D. Bessie didn't buy it, and it was always going to be the same subdivision plan. And this was all 4 years ago, but this is brand new misinformation today. So you can't ever stamp it out.
There's on that room, you have to buy property.
Right, we bought property on two sides of the road, and that's all public information, and it's all yours, but it's constantly going on. The good news is that it's mostly concentrated in a couple of places online. Just nobody at this table is either paid to do this stuff all the time, certainly not in the time of that. So somebody else.
We could spend hours.
So I may be off on this, but it's touching on something both Matt, well, actually the three of you talked about. It strikes me, looking back over the years of this year, that the citizens article for the ones that seem to be the most far-reaching in terms of changes that are taking place on the island. So we spent a lot of time on, and this is where I may be off in my interpretation, but is that a symptom of the fact that our collective policy setting boards aren't getting to the topics that are most important to the people in the community? Because it seems that, there's a lot of time and energy that goes into citizens articles. There's an underlying something that's happening in the community that people want to push them forward, and then they have a forum in order to which to go forward. And so it just comes back around to are we collectively focusing on the things that are important to the community?
Well, I think that's true, but I also think that our form of government, town meeting government, allows small groups of people who are very passionate, our island home, to get up and sort of dominate debate. I always think that meeting where the Our Island Home article failed. I mean, there was a nor'easter that night. We had incredibly low turnout, and all due respect to Ms. Cartoonin, she and her followers showed up and, defeated a perfectly reasonable program.
But yes.
Oh, and I'm just gonna say, but then if you look at the elections, there are a lot of voters who, she didn't collect very many votes in terms of her select board, candidacy, which struck me as, what are the pockets of people who really are passionate about this versus 10,000 voters on this island who don't pay enough attention.
But even in terms of, our follow-up to that, when that happened, like, that was a fairly catastrophic event for Nantucket that got overturned, because the cost of doing this in the future, we lost like $5 million that night, or more, right?
If it was 5 million, I'd write the check tomorrow.
Right, so but the fact that somehow that needed to be communicated, and it didn't get communicated, and even now, people think there's gonna be a solution. Well, the solution now is gonna be so incredibly overwhelming that we get this paralysis on taking any action forward, because it seems to be way too much to digest. I think people were shocked by how much we spent on the firehouse. And you get all those comments all the time. Well, how many years did it take to get all of that through? And then it was piecemealed and just.
We still have equipment sitting outside in the rain.
Yeah.
Yeah, the garage.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Shut
the
down,
garage got
which
shut
is
down.
outrageous to me.
So now it's gonna cost
More, twice as much, right? So there seems to be not a great grasp of if these ideas are important to the community and we have price tags on them, that delaying them is more expensive than doing them. Sometimes that just seems counterintuitive, but it is coming to be true.
I think our island home is a little bit of a red herring in that discussion, because I don't think it can really be compared to the fire station because of the emotional attachment. I don't know what number of people that voted against it, if they've been told it would be $5, $10, $20 million more in 10 years. I think it's so emotional. There's some people that would have said, I don't care. But I think back to David's point, I think that is interesting. Again, from a policy point of view, the citizen articles that are coming forward and that are passing, is there a theme to them? Is there something that we're not doing? Some of them I think that are coming forward because of the policy that we are making. So people are feeling like it's something that would be supported. But I also think there is an important question to ask: what are we not doing that is encouraging people to look like step up and put these articles forward? And another thought that I had as well in thinking about Campbell's article versus the affordable housing, and again, it's all hypothetical, but I do think when it comes to infrastructure and roadworks is where there's the least amount of trust. So I do think, I think the affordable housing, again, that's an emotional one. I think the infrastructure is one where people want to see why we're spending so much money, where it's going. So I think Stephen, you're right, again, it's all hypothetical, it's the messenger and the style as well, but I do think there does seem to be a bit of a trend with the infrastructure ones being supported at town meeting and then not passing at the ballot.
I was all for leaving the plywood in place.
And that quite a bit as well.
I was all for leaving the plywood in place.
I've been yelled at for taking it out.
I would never yell at you, Dawn, for taking it out.
Yeah,
I like
that was a
it.
family member.
I like the plywood. I was a big fan of the plywood.
It worked okay.
Yeah, it worked fine.
Some of the things with the citizens, like if we had proposed this neighborhood first article, if we had proposed it, we would have been eaten alive without more detail. It would have been shot down in a second. I think we proposed the borrowing through the CPC, and that was defendable, but we wouldn't have gotten that article through. We
That's
would have had
interesting.
to have had so much more work done on it.
I think the same with the
Don't you
city
think?
Boston. I think it's a citizen saying affordable housing is your strategic goal, environment is your strategic goal. I have an idea that is far more radical and aspirational than our board could ever be, and they're putting it forward. So again, I don't know if it's a back and forth.
They're saying move faster. That's what how I view it. I think they're saying move quicker.
But it's they with the lowercase t.
Yes.
It's a few people.
Yes.
It's not the electorate wants to see the board make radical moves. Some people have radical ideas that are shot down. out, they put out an idea that was not supported. And then we have.
In hindsight,
In hindsight, it may not have been that bad.
Yeah, well, I liked it. You know, we could use $30 million every year for something. Okay, set that aside. But then we had a very similar idea the next year, which was $30 million for anything housing related. You know, so, but that's another individual, it's not a block of people. And I think that's the way it ought to be, you know, unless you wanna get rid of town meeting altogether. You know, this is the way it's meant to be, somebody comes up with an idea, we vet it, and then it goes to the vote, you know, it goes to the vote. Most of them fail, you know, most of them fail.
I think Howard's article got us thinking at that level, and it was, I think it sort of paved the way for what happened this year.
It would be interesting to take like the last 5 years of citizens articles, especially the ones with any amount of money associated with them, and kind of see, has anything actually come about of them? So they may have passed in the moment, in the day, but what is the action that's been taken against them? And also too, line them up with the town strategic plan. The town strategic plan is good. You know, the 2 or 3 activities per 3 prongs that you have are very sensible things, and there's actions behind all of them. So, you know, I think that if you can start to align those things and start to say, look folks, the stuff you've proposed is against what we've been thinking about, and you as a citizen have been able to push the boat a little bit farther than we would have done as a governing agency. And maybe that's part of the communication that gets things more in alignment, and in a way of getting people to say, oh no, well, we actually are all rowing mostly in the same direction. Occasionally somebody's going out this way, but mostly we're getting there. It might be interesting to take, how do I get my paws on the last 5 years of town warrants that have passed?
Well,
When is town meeting?
they're largely online, and they're in the town clerk's office.
I have the last, I saved everything for the last 4 years.
The town clerk will be able to give you the articles that actually passed.
Okay.
The votes,
So go see Nancy, get them from her.
Are you
You know what
volunteering?
might be more.
I was
you know,
volunteering, but not till June.
So we picked on some of the big emotional issues, but let's break down the bike article. Because to me, you know, a small article, maybe there's some emotion involved there. But is that the kind of thing, you know, we've had a committee, you know, bike safety committee, it's working. Do we have some problems with the way we're tasking these ad hoc committees and then what we're expecting from them that they either are or are not delivering? Such that if then, Ian's probably on that committee anyway, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yes, he is.
But, you know, what breaks down there that he felt that he had to bring a citizen's article around something that actually, in my view, ought to be fairly pro forma. I mean, I know there were some issues to deal with it, but, you know, we occupied a fair amount of time on town meeting floor, pulled the article, and, you know, where was the committee that was working on it? And why didn't they produce something that then was actionable, that didn't force it to come to town meeting in order to get some action? Was that? So, the big emotional issues you may never be able to dispatch with, but there seems to be, and that's, we're looking at this mid-level of articles that, you know, may
Contract
speak,
review committees are
may
another good
speak
example.
more to, you know, some policy failures, you know, either the ad hoc groups, the elected groups, the appointed groups, to push those things through to.
Do you think the trend is that it's a lack of satisfaction that is driving these people to create these articles? Because if we look at them all, they're all coming from somebody not feeling satisfied by whatever group is representing them, or action that is being taken on a particular issue,
Or lack of.
or lack of action, yes.
But you do have the most historical knowledge of this. Do you think that it is a change? I mean, are we seeing an increasing number of these citizen articles, or do you think this is always?
I think it's always been happening, and I think that we have a culture here of citizen articles. We have probably more than any other town. Often at Cape Cod Managers, we go around saying how many citizen articles we have. And it's, you know, we have about the same amount. annually, roughly, and I mean, I have tried to talk to some of the citizens about, look, we could actually probably sponsor this for you, do what you're doing, and they don't wanna do it. They wanna do it themselves, and I think, okay, it's never gonna work. And the department heads are all gonna have an issue with it, and it's either not gonna pass the town meeting, or it's not gonna pass the attorney general, and if you just let us help, I mean, I maybe need to do a better job with the reach out of that, and like I'm saying about the citizen guide, trying to get that out more even now. I think sometimes people just wanna do their own thing.
And they do, and that's humans,
For as
I
long
mean,
as
that's
that's
humans.
an election.
right? So that's just humans
As
as well.
Might be just stop signs.
I mean, I do sometimes feel like the town, on some of these articles, I can't think, and the bike one's probably a bad one to play devil's advocate on, but I think sometimes, you know, town government or town is doesn't oppose things that it should oppose. I mean, I think too often you just say, well, we let them get up there and say whatever they're gonna say, and who knows, you know, you get the crowd going, and then you get articles passed that, you know, among ourselves, either FinCom or Select Board, is saying, you know, this is a really stupid idea, why do, you know,
We
and-
had
and
Andrew
yet-
in front of us, and he said they don't ever say no, it's always take no action. There's a way that we all have of saying no to an article. And my committee, we debate every year which ones we ought to say no to and which ones we ought to take no action. The planning board doesn't do that at all. And I think that's what allows some of this stuff to bubble up. You know, if you're an expert in your field, you ought sometimes to say no. It's not worth discussion. In that sense, it really does send a different message to town meeting.
I mean, I was struck, Dawn, by your comment that you had feedback that having select board members stand up and either set the stage for an article or make a position, you know, articulate a position. I think that's a positive. I mean, I would think that the select board, as the executive pinnacle of the town, has a lot of leverage to be able to stand up and say, you know, Article X, we oppose it because of 1, 2, 3, and 4, and whatever. You know,
I think it's credible.
But you have to have the information to stand up and to say it properly. I mean, it's part of the bike article, some of that was, you know, I supported that strongly, I'm on that committee. You know, some of that was pushback, you know, from department heads that didn't wanna do it and didn't see it as necessary, and the change, and it's inertia, and people don't wanna change. We do something this way, we can't change, it's this way. And, you know, and really, you know, some of it was that, I think, on that one article. I think if people had like raised their hands, you know, if I had asked people to raise their hands earlier in the thing, everyone rides a bike, and how many of you have almost been, you know, killed, and they all put their hands up early on, I think, you know, it'd been a little better repaired, I think it would have passed, but, you know, but I think.
But, with all due respect, that specific article, if we're talking about that a little bit, this is a little bit why I don't put out a recommendation, because I get this feedback of, well, you just don't wanna do it. It's too hard, your department heads don't wanna do it. If you take that citizen article apart, there are very specific things in it that either weren't legal, weren't enforceable, or were, not mentioned, but came out at town meeting, like the removal of the signs on the bike paths. That wasn't even written in there. But that was apparently the intent.
But that had been talked, and this is again, partly a lack of communication, because that had been talked about at that committee level, that had been talked about with, you know, with representatives there that understood.
Well, but
Mike Burns knew it, you know, police knew it, you guys might know it.
No, the police did not know it.
We didn't know
Well, they should have, because Kevin was there and was in liaison with it, so.
Well, it didn't get back to town admin, let me put it that way. That even after meeting with the sponsor, there was, I never, maybe I didn't say, do you mean all the stop signs are going to be removed on the bike path? But I never thought to say that, because it didn't say that anywhere.
But in that case, it's interesting, like, if you could, they've gone and looked at all the different bike paths, and they're all inconsistent, they're all different, depending what year they were done, who did them, what the rules were.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and it's made it a very dangerous situation, and it's made all the drivers, you know, anyone who rides a bike will tell you, all the vehicle drivers think they have the right of way everywhere. And they stop in front of you, they pull in front of you, they yell at you, whether you're on the road or on the bike path, and so there has to be some consistency, so somehow what PPAC is hoping to do over the next year is work with staff and sort of clarify what the right way to do this is. Because there is something that has to be done.
That would be a great idea, because the other side of that is a lot of people say the bikers think they have the right of way.
No, and they do, and they, well, part of, and they do. There are a lot of
Matt,
bikers that go.
Today,
that
I was
go right
coming from
across.
Bartlett Farm, I was at the stop sign, I was at the intersection first, there's a stop sign at the bike path, the bike was far away, I was getting ready to go, and the bike sailed through its stop sign, and they had to stop, and I was at the intersection first, so both sides don't comply.
I understand, but here's what should happen in that case, and why they do that is because there's so many, and why the bikers do it is there's so many other signs that are just nuisance signs. At Bartlett Farm Road, Bartlett Road, they should stop 100%. You know, going across Milestone, they should stop. Going across, Nantucket, et cetera, they should stop. But a lot of these people, a lot of the individuals have put up stop signs at the ends of driveways. And the people, and so the bikers, if you count this number of stop signs, if you're a biker, you wanna do the loop, you're gonna stop 58 times on doing the loop to Wisconsin, if you comply with every single stop sign.
I have to anyway, I'm a bad biker, so.
Yeah, but that to me, that's idiocy. If
Yeah,
people-
no, it is.
and
It
so,
is.
and I've talked about it for years before this article came up, I was really happy it came up, because, we've set up a system where people aren't gonna follow the important signs, and, and so nobody follows it. And the other part about it, you can't have two bosses. If you have two bosses, you don't have a boss. And so if you have two stop signs, you don't have a stop sign. There needs to be one stop sign that people follow, and there needs to be a yield sign. And we don't have that now. We have two people responsible to do the same action. And that's, so.
Four-way stops work.
Well, they do, except,
For cars, so they should work for bicycles and cars.
well, they don't work for cars, they
They
go
do
right
four-way
through.
stops work for
They
cars.
go right through them. If you go on the bike path, the cars go right through the stop signs, right through you. And so, because they expect you to stop. Any of these stops, there's only a handful of stop signs on the cars anyway, but they go through the stop sign and stop right in front of the path. Because they're worried about other cars, they're not worried
I was
about
talking
bikers.
about the five corners in cars.
It
I
works
was
there,
talking about
yeah.
cars. It works for cars, is what my point was.
Anyway.
So, are there some process changes we want to either confirm or make going into?
I think your earlier suggestion about looking at the calendar and the timing of when deliverables are due at a certain level of quality and reliability, such that reviews that are then done by whoever it is, whether it's FinCom or the select board, we can say, okay, you've got it to this point, so therefore it's reviewable by us and we'll change 10% afterwards. So I think looking at the calendar, maybe publishing that as early as possible makes sense for the next
So
annual town meeting.
the two of you go to the Capcom, right?
Mhm.
Do you think that process is developed enough that they could deliver Matt's saying earlier than I was saying, but deliver on that this year?
I don't see a high level of confidence here.
No, I mean,
We did have a lot of issues last year, because we had a loss of a staff person who had been handling it, and there was a ramp up of the people who had to come in and handle it. And we were in the process of switching out the, software, which had to be developed sort of a little bit by scratch. But I think most were through that hard part.
I think we're through the hard part. The starting it earlier, I think, can be accomplished, but it will be, from my perspective with my staff, it'll be challenging, because if we send stuff out in, I think it's August or September, whenever, late July, beginning of August, with the expectation to get it back in September, we review it and start the process. I mean, I've committed to the town manager to have free cash certified by the first week of October, which requires me to have the audit done by the last week of September and the CAFR done. There's a lot of demand on my staff right now in that time frame, and the time frame that the town manager and I have developed fits into all the other demands of what the commitments to the town manager are. But if it was a little earlier, I think I could probably make it work, but not more than maybe a week or two earlier to start.
But we were into January, and I think we could probably, I don't think we can commit right this second, but I would think we could get back to the beginning of December. We already have a Capcom meeting scheduled for beginning of June to start talking about the sewer master plan projects, because there's going to be some changes to the capital improvement program because of that. And I think we're probably just gonna start either informal or formal review of, probably some informal review of the capital improvement plan and what we know, maybe changing, just sort of as we start the process.
I'd like to see if the town, maybe through the data platform, polling or survey or poll or whatever it is that they, the right term for that, or through any other means, can start to gauge voters' education level on certain issues before we get to town meeting. And find out, maybe there's 3, maybe there's 5 topics that are the most expensive or otherwise determined to be the most important to achieving select board's goals. And if we have articles attached to those things, let's find out if voters know what the proposal is that's going to be discussed and voted on. And then maybe that's where we, that's the information roadshow that needs to happen.
Do you feel like we need to have a plan for how to address wherever there's gaps before we do that, or do we just do it?
Well, I think that you guys have done a good job about going to the Saltmarsh Center and the Rotary Club and the Landmark House and Island Home and other civic organizations to get the word out about things. But we're not talking about 9,000 people showing up to Walker Auditorium. We know mostly who those people are going to be and how many. And there's enough people who know about these issues that we can go speak almost one-on-one with everybody if we wanted to. Now, obviously that's not feasible for 112 articles, but for a handful of them, it might be. So if there's initiatives that are really important to you guys, and we have maybe now the beginnings of technology that's going to allow us to pull some meaningful data sets about what voters know, I think we should make concerted effort to try to do so.
I want to go a suggestion to say, if something comes to us and it doesn't have numbers attached, and we don't know what the impact is going to be, so I think like diffs and tips and all that stuff, it was really complicated, it became incomplete, we should say no, you should say no. And I think that would send the right message too. We're not doing things on behalf of people, we're doing things because they're the right thing to do, and I think there's not enough of that sometimes.
So Libby, we have, back to one of your earlier points, which is particularly on citizen articles. We have a form that's probably due to be re-looked at.
Yeah.
That was, where we wanted citizens to complete those very questions.
Yeah, and I think hardly anybody has ever done that.
Well, that's because I don't think it goes, when you pick up the papers, I don't think it's attached.
It's on the website, but it's not handed out, that's true.
So people go in
And,
and
and
get
there's,
their,
well, there's not even really
or do they
so much,
just print them off?
yeah, they print it off. Maybe, I guess, maybe they go to the town clerk's office and get a paper, I mean, it's not even, it's not a required form. There's a, well, no. You can propose a form and actually the form, the citizen article format itself should be updated too, because it's, people don't really, they sort of latch on to one from a prior year and just go with that, and it's hard to read sometimes. They come in all manner of.
So we don't have the legal ability to say, if this isn't filled out to this level of completeness and quality, you can't submit it and we won't consider it.
No, cannot.
No, well, we can
Just
tell them, we're not gonna,
Because they're
you can submit it, but we're not
give a
gonna,
negative motion on it.
you come to the public hearing, but that's it.
No, I
I
didn't
mean,
know.
I think we can push
Certain
it.
places we
And,
apply for things.
and there were a
it's
couple
totally
of,
open,
couple of
totally
articles that we pushed hard to get business plans done.
But they can get it on the warrant.
Absolutely. part of it is, I mean, my feeling, and this was the case with the $30 million article, was that I felt in order for the finance committee to make a recommendation for or against or take no action, that we needed to see those numbers. That it just wasn't gonna suffice to stand up at town meeting and say, well, they didn't give us any numbers, so we didn't. I mean, that's sort of a abdication of our role and responsibility. But, you know, it took a lot of work to get something. Lord knows where we started was a far cry from where we ended up. But I don't know how we get, you know, other, you know, everybody to do that. Other than the crowd.
Well, but I think that's actually the model, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you know, they come before the finance committee, and somebody, you know, comes up with something that isn't a $50 stop sign. We can insist on more data and make life sort of visible for them.
In
And
the
if they still,
constructive, most positive
well,
way.
no, I,
I know, and we've done, I mean, we've been,
depends on
I
what
think
it is.
we've really bent over backwards on a lot of people to get them to.
Yeah. I think we all have experiences in our day-to-day jobs where if we were to present something in the format in which we receive it, it wouldn't work. So we understand that some people need more coaching to get to the right answer in the format. I can do it sometimes. You gotta make sure, Terry, you got that down, and it was diplomatic.
So, can we count on mid-December-ish for Capcom? I mean, how much do we,
Yeah.
between enterprise and general fund, we spend as much on capital as we did on operating this year, right? Pretty close. So it's a big number that's not getting much beyond the capital. You guys spend a lot of time.
And that's partly our fault. We've got, it's a half hour, an hour for 3 meetings leading up to it, and you've got 100 and something hours. Yeah, so it's sort of,
But we,
we do, but I'm talking just, not even Capcom, but all of these different, there were articles that we could have talked, we talked about marijuana for a month, but there are other articles that we could have talked about for a half hour, 40 minutes. And there's some of the stuff that came through, we just don't have enough time to
So-
really dig into it, even if we wanted to.
we were supposed to have a joint meeting December 11th, yeah. That would have been a good kickoff to run that, which would have helped.
Make sure we have that.
And Brian, are you comfortable with Libby that you can produce the operating budgets in the same schedule, or?
I don't think we had a big delay in operating budget this year.
I think actually we're making some changes that will make it more efficient, so I think we.
I mean, I think our
certainly can.
process is now pretty efficient and understood, so.
And like Brian said, we're gonna be introducing, some new software that's going to use, and at least we would like it too.
It'll make the
Well,
budget process a lot better, a lot more efficient for everyone.
And then on real estate, can Ken step in and take the lead on stuff that the planning board doesn't look at, that's increasingly being brought by citizens?
Yes, we were talking about that, he will probably,
Matt and I talked about it.
yep, he will meet with the citizen to try to get at what is it that they trying to do, and come up with the sort of pros and cons and costs.
I think it would be worth considering a possible joint meeting somewhere along the way where our boards, maybe 80% of the way through, 90% through, just to check in and see if we are on the same page, if there's anything or not. We can ask questions. Maybe, I don't know about the timing of your feedback, but if we had some feedback already from the community as to what was being understood and wasn't, that could be helpful.
you could do that at just, you can just have the chair and the vice chair, say, show up and give them a slot on your agenda.
carry, carry the message of where the FinCom was at that point in time. I think there's more to be gained from a whole board committee sitting and talking like this, that we do stand at the mic. And this is certainly public, but there's something different about standing in the audience and delivering a report.
So a joint meeting like this before the motions are final, somewhere along the line?
Yeah.
When was the timing? What would be the timing?
Probably early, maybe-ish February. Cause you start finalizing the motions generally first week of March, and then we have school vacation to deal with, so maybe that prior week or two. Cause I think you're pretty far down the road right now. With the review anyway. You'd be ready to have a joint discussion.
Yeah, we generally be ready right after our
Like you would do.
January budget review. That's the last. We'll have seen all the citizens' articles.
I mean, we went through the citizens articles 3 times as a group.
Yes.
And I mean, I think one of the other places that were things we constantly wait for is the planning board to give us their recommendations. And so we usually delay those until the very end. Right, those are the last things.
Right.
That and anything from the real estate committee.
Now maybe Ken might
Should be better one.
liaison. Nobody wants to sit through it.
Oh, Ken liaison for zoning?
Yeah.
No. Oh, real estate committee.
That's what they say about FinCom, everything.
Well, nobody wants to sit there and think on it? Yeah, I don't.
That's why there's 9 of us.
Can't even get our members to sit through it.
I just
Yes,
want to
excuse me.
struggle more at the ballot level.
So I was gonna say, I've been mostly just listening because I was part of the public during this process this past year. And as part of the public, I felt the outreach was really good, really strong, you know, there was a lot. The one thing I felt was a lot of the videos came from the town, and that's where a lot of the public distrust comes from. So maybe having citizens do some of those videos with NCTV 18, having people from Surfside say why those improvements are needed, or having somebody, you know, that lives near the Rotary, the Coast Rotary, say why it was needed, and even having people say why they're against it in a video, maybe just to see both sides. But I thought that that's where we struggle about the ballot, is people feel informed for town meeting, we had a lot of outreach, but then when it came to the ballot question, people just go and vote no for everything. And maybe just having some more sessions on the ballot questions would have spurred some answers.
So it's publicly available data who votes in elections and who doesn't. Maybe we ought to know who those people are and figure out how to reach those people. I'm not kidding. I mean, it's probably mostly the same people who's voting in every annual and special town election. So know who those people are, and reach them. They're all involved in something.
And to that point, I definitely think there's also a strategy of, I don't have to go to the town meeting because I'm just gonna go vote the next day, no on everything. Right, I think I've heard that as a strategy.
I heard a strategy for voting this year was putting no on all the money requests because I want the town to know what it feels like to go with that. As if the town is some separate entity apart from this person.
Yeah. Would you mind, it's hard to do this formally, but would you mind coming up and just identifying yourself, because we are being.
You don't have to go right up to the mic, but just come in range of it.
Mary Longacre, and I want to piggyback on the last 2 comments. I generally tend to support what the town is doing and generally trust that the town boards are doing a good job as a member of the public. But my tax bill doubled just about last year, and that really caused me to think, can we as taxpayers afford what we're spending? And I think that's what you're seeing at the ballot box. There's a lot of people are saying, I can't afford for the town to decide to spend more money. And that's not something I'm hearing discussed.
Did you hear residents with
Yes.
because we raised that.
I went down, actually, checked in the assessor's office to make sure that there wasn't an error or something gone wrong. And no, it was, my property was worth more. And long story short, the effect was my tax bill almost doubled.
My tenants, there's doubled over the last 5 years downtown, and it's a gentrification issue. So along the island is, we all, a lot of people stand up and say, our taxes only, the taxes are cheap, rich people pay them, but people still get whacked. And that's the part, a lot of people don't even understand how taxes work and how all that stuff works, most people don't. But when that happens, they can say, how can this happen? You said it was only 2%, you said it was only 4%, well, everything else in that area goes up and you get hit. So there is a lot of that going on.
I supported the $30 million for affordable housing, but then I thought, I'm gonna have to pay that. And I was like, well, that took a little bit of the wind out of my sails of my support for that. I mean, I strongly believe that we need to do something, we need to do it quickly about affordable housing. And, and I've supported Tobias's initiative, even without the numbers, even when I saw that it was not just 30 million, but it was an annual commitment to fund a deficit situation. I was like, I don't see any other plan on the table to do something quickly about affordable housing. So I will vote for this, but it is gonna hurt me, and that's just one article. All the rest are gonna hurt me too.
In real dollars, the average tax bill for year-round residents in Nantucket is below the average tax bill in Massachusetts, in real dollars. So, our per capita income is not the highest in Massachusetts, but it's higher than the average. And as a percentage of annual income, year-round taxpayers pay a lower percentage of their income on real estate tax.
Respectfully, in my dollars, a higher tax bill is a higher tax bill.
A higher tax bill is a higher tax bill, but we have low tax bills because of the enormous growth, not just in the value of your property, but in the number of taxable properties on the island. And frankly, the tax bills should have been higher sooner. They should have been higher. So we should have been paying for a lot of this infrastructure stuff for years, for decades. Matt, when you talk about taxpayers paid for development of the island, you're right. But everybody should have been paying more. It's not that it was just misallocated, everybody should have been paying more. So the tax bill is likely to go up, but it's not because we're spending on things that aren't worthy expenditures. Things cost more in 2019 than they did in 1989, but that doesn't mean we don't need them. We're not here spending on
I agree with
things.
you, Stephen. I absolutely agree with you. We should have been spending the money earlier. But I think that's the disconnect that we're having at the ballot box, and that's the point that I wanted to make sure was heard, was that it doesn't matter if you're right, if people can't afford the money. Doesn't matter if it's less than somebody
But
else.
I'm not hearing that people can't afford it. I'm hearing that people are upset that it's going up by a higher percentage than they're comfortable with. They may not be aware of the fact that the tax bill in real dollars, not just as a percentage of your valuation, in real dollars, your taxes are low. And people may not understand that. And maybe that's one of the things that needs to be messaged. And it's not comfortable to say this good thing that we've had, the free parking lot downtown outside the AMP is going to go away. People aren't gonna wanna hear that. They don't wanna pay for parking. But, we've had low tax bills. They are going to go up. I mean, there's no way around that. And if we're gonna continue to have worthy initiatives defeated because your taxes are gonna go up, let's start talking about that issue. Let's not nibble around it, let's talk about that.
But the tax rate actually went down.
Right.
15 cents.
But that's where I think we get into trouble.
It's a math equation.
It is
That's where we
a
get into
math
trouble,
equation.
because the
But the
taxes are going
assessments
up,
went
and we need to be honest about that, to say they're going up and they're gonna continue to go up. But it's still a low dollar amount when you compare ourselves to Massachusetts neighbors. And when you get into Connecticut and New York, it's even a far better deal in real dollars, not just percentages. I agree with you, Matt, you can't talk that way. You can't say just the rate's low.
But I think this just brings up all of the other issues around who is Nantucket for, what are their services for, who's being served by them, what's happening in the downtown. I mean, it's true, because I mean, from an economic development standpoint, we have And I will say, like, I've probably looked at 6 or 8 leases for different businesses downtown this year, and what's happened is that we have priced out entry-level people from coming in and opening businesses. And we're not gonna see that anymore. And part of what's happened there is because the housing issue has played into that, and so it all is trickling down so that the only people left to open and have businesses here are people who come from off island and can afford to have loss leaders. And that's gonna change our economy dramatically. And that relates to everything that Mary's saying, because the people who are left may not be able to afford to pay the tax bills. So it's just creating that larger divide of who's here, because the opportunities are diminishing. And I don't know as a philosophical piece, like, how do you really address that, right? Somebody will come up with some citizens article though.
We do still have the ability to raise the residential exemption.
We do another 10%.
Yeah.
But
Or
I'm
another
scared to
percentage.
do it all at once and not do it at the right time when it's like another new school that we absolutely have to have. Right.
And raising it wouldn't
Right.
help the situation, like, it would help you a little bit, but it wouldn't solve a situation like this. This is a, gentrification or neighborhood went up situation. Okay, instead of doubling, it goes up 80%. It still didn't, it still doesn't solve it.
Yeah, it feels like when we're making those decisions, we don't have all of that information to understand how we might be increasing the exemption, but if the property value is going up more than that, and I would like to know is that 50% increase, is that a justifying of things that we haven't paid for, or is that going to be continual? Is that the amount that we're increasing? Or is there going to be incremental increases going forward? Because to me, I think even when you're underpaying for something, you need to know that when something goes up 50% or 100%, there's no way that that's not going to impact the ballot box. There's just no way to say, well, it's okay because your taxes are really low. People are going to respond to that. So I would like to know, is this something that if we can get a better understanding of that balance between residential exemption, increases in property values, and what people are actually paying, is it going to continue to increase at an exponential rate, or is it going to be incremental going forward? Because then we use our additional 10%, or we, like to Stephen's point, we've got to have a conversation, or we're going to continue to have deferred maintenance on infrastructure.
What
So what's
percentage?
happened to our mill rate? This is a pretty easy answer to the question.
I mean, it went down 15 cents because, we increased the valuation, and when you increase
So
the valuation,
what's happening is
Yeah.
the valuations are
Yeah.
rising.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I
we're
was just gonna say-
essentially, if you look at it right now, the town is valued at, the equalized value is almost $25 billion. Okay, and that's a jump of probably roughly $1 billion from the year before, and that's gonna drive the tax rate down, and everyone's bill is gonna go up because everybody's property is assessed or valued at a higher rate.
But the
So, Mary, in your case, did your property must have appreciated in value?
It has over the last 5 years dramatically.
And that, if the mill rate stays the same or goes down, your taxes double
It's the assessment.
because it's a mathematical equation.
But my point is that my personal budget didn't anticipate that hit.
The appreciation.
You know, and to know that it's gonna hit again, because I just voted for 30 million for affordable housing and a whole slew of other things, and it's gonna hit again the year after that, and interest rates are going up, it's just, it's a lot to swallow. It hit me kind of all at once last month, saying, wow, I need to really take a look at where I'm spending money, because I don't have any discretion over what I have to contribute to the tax base.
to answer what Rita's question really is, is or should be, what are the voting public, what is the impact on the voting public, what's the impact on the whalers gonna be over the next 20 years? What is the impact on the year-round people in the year-round neighborhoods gonna be over the next 20 years? And I think the impact is gonna be gentrification. I think that their properties are gonna be increasingly under pressure from outside of here, from either rich second homeowners, or now it's increasingly from, pension funds and other investment vehicles, investors coming here. And so I think that there's gonna be more of what you experienced is what's gonna be happening, not less.
And, you know, even if you look fair, I think the next area that's happening, is fairgrounds and all this whole area that we look at and think is all normal, islander housing, is all gonna start to become second home owner housing. And so, so I think, it's not enough just for us to look at, the rate and that one thing. We have to look, and you could look at your maps from real estate and tell us what's happening in neighborhoods. These people are gonna get hit, and they're gonna continue to, Brian, what's gonna happen when the next economic downturn hits, new growth slows, and that doesn't grow at the same rate that it has for the last 8 years? Are we gonna see?
Well, I mean, if new growth slows, we'll just have less money under the allowable increases under Proposition 2.5 to allocate. I mean, what will happen ultimately in the next slowdown is, and it will take a little while to catch up, is that eventually home sales will go in the opposite direction, and they'll be priced less than they're selling for now. And it's just an inverse calculation. I mean, if home sales in areas get depressed, then the values go down and the tax rate goes up. And it's just the opposite of effect of what's happening right now. As the values increase across the town, the tax rate goes down.
But services have to also get cut, because the Prop 2.5, grows the budget by a certain amount plus new growth.
Mhm.
And if new growth drops away, then we don't have that.
Another
We're
revenue,
gonna
another
end up
revenue
voting
drop
for
away too.
operating overrides is what's gonna happen.
Well,
That's
eventually,
right,
I mean,
but-
well, that's,
So if we're not having the conversation now, when the situation's relatively good for everybody, and we're not saying that, your bill's going up now, and prepare for the bad days also, then
Well-
we're not likely to get those overlaps back.
well, to that point and to the question though, the town manager, myself, the financial analyst, Ally, and the assistant town manager, Greg, and I, we've all had conversations about what type of plan and how would it be implemented when we see this starting to happen. So it's not something that we're just sitting back waiting for. We've already had internal discussions about what it would look like. But from a tax rate perspective, the tax rate would rise because values are coming down, and we have to raise a certain amount of money to operate the town. Wouldn't want to get into all the details about it, but it's certainly something we've already started talking about.
But to be, without getting into all the details, overall, I agree. In an economic downturn, no one's gonna vote for an override, so spending will have to be cut, and priorities have to be addressed and created, and things that we had this discussion 10 years ago. What is an essential town function? Whatever it isn't is not gonna be happening for a
So
while.
to get back to that conversation we were having about the garage back here behind the fire station, if you don't spend it today, it will be more expensive when we inevitably spend it on the bill. So we need to be prioritizing the things today when the climate is relatively good, because we're less likely to be able to get those parts.
And I mean, we're also, I don't want to say it's a guarantee, but we're probably likely to be into some type of recession as some of this excluded debt is going to be added, which we're very fortunate that we have a longer period of time to roll bands. Granted, it costs us short-term interest, but we don't pay a lot in short-term interest. So we have a little flexibility to try to, do the best we can to mitigate when those exclusions hit, to try to make sure that they don't impact everybody all at once, to the extent possible. I mean, obviously, when we discuss this with our financial advisors, if they say we're seeing the lowest rates we've seen in history, you should be borrowing the money now and locking those rates in. We've got to also look at that too, because I don't want to try to wait and miss, having to pay 4% interest versus being able to get it at 2.5%. I mean, there's a delicate balancing act that we're trying to maintain to not create an unbearable situation for all taxpayers.
And what you're talking to is really with 2.5. It's negotiating contracts within that. It's the contracts and the wages and the benefits and the other stuff all fitting within that. Because when it doesn't, that's when new growth has to fund existing operations, that's when you're in trouble. If new growth is just funding new things you need, then you're okay. When new growth starts to fund day to day, you're in trouble, and that's what we're trying to avoid. To be honest, we're not there yet. I don't, in my mind, I bring this up every chance I get. But this is the budget you're gonna be talking about. I mean, already I'm seeing that there's tightening of the credit markets now, $2.5 million below market, which is the bulk of home sales. If those start to decline, what impact does that have on spec builders, on roofers, on real estate agents, on landscapers and everything. You know, and maybe that reverses itself, and maybe by the end of the summer, we're not talking about the same thing. But right now, it's easy for buyers in the 5 million plus range to get money, but they're also not buying. I mean, we're seeing historically low, not historically low, but low for the last 5 years, sales in that upper end of the market, and it's harder for the people in the lower end of the market, so-called, to get money. You know, so if those trends continue, then we may already be too late to be having these discussions, but we certainly need to be having them.
So, to
Deep
conversation.
trying to have a drink. So to summarize, we're gonna, on schedule, we're gonna shoot for the middle of December for Capcom. We're gonna shoot for a early February joint. I mean, we can certainly do a Capcom, FinCom, last meeting in December. Shoot for an early, no later than mid-February joint meeting of the two groups in a setting that's similar to this. You're comfortable with your budget times. You guys will keep your January 21st or whatever that date is right around there for your approval. And if we see at Thanksgiving some, perhaps an informal discussion of the citizens articles that come, we'll see around Thanksgiving, maybe where we think there's gonna be some extra effort that's gonna need to go into it. It's probably a worthwhile discussion.
Or anything that could have come up as a result of the economy changing or other priorities.
Well, hopefully, I mean, these guys have, run their dashboards to keep on top of that.
Do we maybe now, ask Nantucket Data Platform what it would cost? Maybe, I don't know, Stephen, I think your idea was a good one.
That was something, that they, wasn't my idea, the data platform presented to us last week as a service that would be able to offer things. So I was just suggesting one application for it, is find out if voters are aware of what we think are the most important things. I think, like, if you participate in their housing survey, they're gonna ask you some questions that have nothing to do with housing, so they qualify you in certain groups that they can later, segment.
Anything from over here, Tom?
They're just here for the other one, the other agenda item.
The
There's
airport.
the airport. No, no, they don't need money. There's an agenda item on the update on the airport agreement. So
So they get the bonus of having to.
hear all of this.
Getting to hear all
So we'll need to set a date. To timeline all that out.
Joy.
And we might go to a special time meeting.
That'd be great, thanks.
I like it. One or two.
One in the summer and one in the fall, just cuts.
That's fine.
Are we going to have an airport update now?
Yes,
Okay.
it should
Let's
be
do it.
brief. So,
That was in the select
as-
board meeting?
well, no, actually, the town manager asked me to give it to both FinCom and Select Board, so I'll be as brief as possible. So as most people remember, between 2012 and 2014, the town had subsidized the airport to $4.6 million, and 2 years ago, the Select Board and the Airport Commission agreed to a payback schedule of that $4.6 million, which the airport submitted to the FAA. One thing to note, first of all, is that the airport has been making payments on the schedule that was originally agreed to in the agreement. In discussions with the airport general manager and through him from the board, the commission, we have been reserving all of the money that we've been getting until the FAA gave their blessing to an agreement in the event something happened and we had to be able to give it back. So it has not gone to free cash as of yet or anything like that. We heard back in March, actually. We've had numerous discussions over the last 18 months, probably, Tom, with them. about this agreement, getting them to come to a number that everybody could live with, and get the town as much of that money back as we possibly could. I will say, in one point in the discussions, they essentially said no to pretty much everything. And, you know, through the diligence of the airport, they went back and said this year we worked with them to provide more answers. Ultimately, the FAA has indicated to the airport that they will agree to a number which is $3,955,087.85. They have said that $656,708.84 is not eligible for reimbursement because they claim that it happened outside the 6-year look-back window. We have had extensive discussions internally, along with the airport's legal representation. We've talked internally to Kopelman and Page about this. We have recommended that we agree to this number because to continue to fight the FAA at this point puts a significantly larger portion of this dollars at risk. And I think both of us, I think I can speak for Tom when I say that we want to get the agreement signed and move on to continue the payback because the airport is budgeting this amount of money every year. The proposal to the amendment is to shorten the agreement by 3 years, and they will continue to budget $235,000 a year in their operating budget. The way the agreement is written is that if DPW needs any of the materials from the airport, the runway reclamations or those projects, it's offset based on an average cost through Mass DOT Region 5, which has been working well. Right now, we have about $200,000 reserved on the books out of a total of about just over $600,000 that would have come back to us, but the DPW has used a significant amount of material, which has saved us the cost from having to go out and buy it. So the airport commission is meeting tomorrow to approve this, correct, Tom? Okay. And then the airport commission will approve it tomorrow night, and we would bring it back before the select board to approve the amendment down to that dollar and the new payback schedule. This has been a lot of work on everybody's part to get to this number, and it's our recommendation that we move forward with it so we don't put any more money at risk of not being able to get back.
What's been the transfer rate on the material?
It varies depending on what the DPW is doing for projects. Last year, they didn't use quite as much. The first year when they were supposed to make a $135,000 payment, they made about, I think, 30 or 40 because the DPW used a substantial amount of the materials. It depends on what he has for project. So we use an average.
Yeah, that price is coming up to almost half of what we're doing with that.
Yeah, so it's based on Region 5 bids for the same type of material.
So you're paying price to me.
So we're capturing some of the 600,000.
Via that material.
And if we get more material, we capture more.
And then whatever that difference between that and the 235 is what they write to us in a check every year at the end of the year. So that is the update.
And they run that over scale. And how do you do your record keeping? I mean, how many tons do you have that they're taking?
It's based on volume of the dump trucks. I think we'll actually bring the amended agreement before the select board next week to adopt that number and to re-sign it based on the new schedule with the amendment. I don't believe so, Mr. Chairman. I think we just wanted to, since everybody's going to be here, it was probably the best time to go through where we're at with it with everyone. So.
Every time we sign anything with the FAA, and I always bring this up every time we do, they own your kids, they own everything for the rest of your life. You know, it's a $50,000 agreement, and they own it. So it's it seems crazy to me that we give, as a community, we gave the land, and it's tons of land and tons of stuff to be happening there, and then they make, then they do what they do. But it's, anyway, I can't help but say it. But the agreements, every time I read them, and I bring it up to the board. Look, we're agreeing that the FAA owns us for the rest of our lives. Here you go. But that's the way it works. So this is probably the best we're going to do.
Yeah, I do. I believe it is.
I believe it is too.
I do appreciate all the work because Tom and his staff did an awful lot of work with some help from my staff to convince them of this, and I appreciate the work that they've done to get it to this point. So,
I'm gonna say the first answer was no, and then you went up to 4 million.
that was kind of an aha moment. So,
Is there anything else?
I have nothing else. I think, was it just the scheduling of a FinCom meeting?
We do need to do end-year transfers.
So I was going to propose the select board's meeting on June 19th, correct? So I would propose the 17th or 18th, if either one of those dates works for FinCom, to do the first round of 33B transfers. Whatever works for you.
So formally on the 17th.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Sorry, what were the dates again?
17th and 18th of June.
Of June.
The day is fine.
Either day is fine.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't have any.
Cause I'm not gonna be on that.
I like the 17th better.
When do you make your new appointments?
The 19th. So the 17th before?
We'll fill this in,
Ally will send out the calendar. And we'll secure a room tomorrow.
Which date?
17th. Excuse me.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
I don't think we ever.
we never called it.
No. You guys were guests.
We were,
Thank you.
I think we got a quorum tonight.
Excuse me.
We just committed a violation then, if we all sat here?
no, we were just invited guests.
Show up and make them work. No, one time filing complaints on myself.
That's good to know.
Thank you all.
Thank
Sorry
you.
for being late, it wasn't on my
Thanks,
calendar.
guys.
Well, good, and never seen
Why are you guys doing that?
He is so fine with that.
Oh, that'd be great.
Alright,
You guys, I
awesome.
didn't know.
Thank you.
So just write down the thing. No big deal.
Some of them have ways of the kids. Some of the kids want to, but yeah. They would close and then they get it.
Yes, yes, that's what he needs.
Thanks for saving the job.
No
So
problem.
how's the first month and a half?
It's good. Learning a lot. Look out for you.
Good luck tomorrow. I know the easy work is setting boundaries. Positive, calm thoughts.
Well, you should plan on me trying to take the vote.
Come to my place on the road.
Okay.
I'll be down, I'm at the car shop, I'll be downstairs.
He heard it. Is that our report?
I somehow decided it just doesn't look good.
$255 years, 10 years. Money's pretty cheap.
Yeah, sorry. See you. We have a work tomorrow.
It's all, well, it's several properties. Yeah, so if you like. Yeah, so if you like. I don't know, because it's like, 3 units here, 3 units here, one affordable, and stuff, each of the properties, so a rental type situation. What is the time? Probably. Yeah, so this would be more like mine. But it doesn't always work that way. Well, they're all in different sites. I think the most he has is 3 contiguous properties, each with 3 dwellings. But it's got a thing with like 6 or making a copy. Sorry about that. For 15 million, you can have all of them on the side. No problem.
Do we know if Eric's on the call?
I don't know. I know that no, Erica did. We're waiting to hear from Michelle.
Michelle did.
Yeah, we're not sure.
Hi.
You'll probably have 70 by the time you guys have the criteria. Yeah. So he's heard that the town is willing to spend $400,000 or $500,000 per side unit and not have to make all of them affordable. And it's like, you're gonna get that. I said, well, you don't need that much money. And they said, well, wow, what if you did it? Yeah, that still works.
I know, it's what, you so sad.
You're not feeling well?
You, do you feel alright?
Oh, no. Gray doesn't, no, it doesn't. Do you know how, I don't know, but I know
We were adding
how to, when you, to send out an invitation to the meeting?
right away.
Yeah.
Send it out.
If we could do that.
That they respond.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Well, everyone, I sent one out for this meeting, I sent out a calendar.
You sent out the announcement for the agenda or whatever.
I can go.
I don't remember seeing an invitation, Louis, you did. And usually it comes to me.
I don't wait for us to put you on the third. I'm so sorry, because I did send out like a while ago, before we even had the agenda set.
So I think we're gonna see more of that.
Oh,
Oh, I know,
yeah,
I
I'm
know,
sorry.
I think
It's probably
that,
just
you know, a lot
that.
of these expenses are not.
You know, I was thinking,
So we need, one of them, that taxes don't.
yeah, I'll be there.
I'll be there.
And then they don't show up.
Yeah,
See, now
okay,
you
yeah,
can call them
yeah,
back and say things.
yeah.
You said you'd be there, you didn't show up. You promised to be there.
I know, I should look to the respondent, that's a good idea. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. Thank you.
I'll see you tomorrow, thank you. Well, that's the other problem, we got to double it. I said to this guy who's got all these units, I said, you know, as a sweetener for the town, if it's costing anything, you should give the town first right to do before you market it. Well, that town's got a pool, it's open, and where they go, it's that, that's. Yeah, you know, to buy a house, and then to buy a property next door, and then you turn the basement into a apartment. Everything's been done in the last 6 or 8 years. Yeah, so everything's ready to go. Yeah. I don't think he wants to do all 60 units, but so for $15 million, you get 60 side units, that's a good deal. Well, that's the thing, is you still collect all the tax money, you have no liability, you have no maintenance costs. This is the way to do it. How are you? Yeah, and that's why I try to get everybody to put this in business. Yeah, now, now it's just a matter of time. Yeah, well, that's a bucket of
Yeah, no, I know. I gotta make sure we have that. Oh, yeah, I will, I'll. All right. Good night, Libby.
Good night, see you guys.
Try not to stay here too long. Hey, I wanted to tell you, I removed email from my phone.
Yeah.
The best thing I did.
Oh, yeah, never.
This weekend, I didn't hardly looked at my phone.
Yeah.
80% less.
Yeah, I know, see?
Oh, this is so much better.
Terrible.
I agree.